Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly podcast where we try and change the format and talk about, say that it's something different all the time, but sometimes we just come back to some old tried and tested stuff and talk about just a grand subject, which is what we're doing this week. My name's Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
And this week we're talking about wealth. How much? How many pounds? How many pounds have you got in your pocket?
12 million.
12 million? I've got maybe £2.70 in coins.
I haven't got any money in my pocket. I've got no pockets because I'm wearing girl clothes.
Such a working class, middle class attitude to wealth, that the idea that it is equivalent to currency. These poor people. No clue. If only they knew how to manage their money. Did you see that woman grilling that banking person about how this person on minimum wage was supposed to manage their money, which when there's going to be losing money all the time. Never mind that. Well. Cancel, abort. So when we talk about wealth, what are we going to be talking about?
We're going to talk about the wealthy versus the rest of us.
Right.
I think. Again, good ranting material, I think.
Yes.
And you said something about things like earning interest and stuff.
There's stuff about wealth, portfolios and diversification and all that kind of thing, and currency exchange rates. But it's not going to be boring, promise. Just in terms of, I kind of want to talk about my attitude to how I sort of feel like I'm investing in myself, but then some of the kind of thinking mistakes I've made around whether or not that's been successful. Because you can invest in things, or you can kind of invest in things that let you do more. So, for example, I could buy an expensive laptop in the knowledge that I know that I can make the money back pretty quickly by programming with it. Or recording a podcast, not so much. Especially with this quality of dialogue. So
yes,
should we just let the music go and then just get started? Because I'm just feeling quite let's just go fast today.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
not be at 17 minutes still banging on about our weeks this week. Let's get to the topic.
Yeah, okay.
How was your week, Ivanka? How are you doing?
My week has been a good week. I have got a slightly croaky voice. At one point this week I thought I was going to lose my voice, but I've averted that disaster.
Hear you for now.
And I had a very nice time teaching at Sussex Uni yesterday. I had some of the students got really good ideas and they've obviously done lots of work. Others have not done any work, but
can we steal it?
That's up to them.
Are we going to be stealing it?
Am I going to be stealing it?
Yeah. Is it any of it good enough?
Not stealing. Some of the ideas I think have potential, definitely. But whether I would want to steal them myself, I don't know. But I would like to encourage them or invite them perhaps to, let us blog about their ideas maybe. So that's fun. The social care thing is, I'm hopefully going to be finished next week. So making a business case for some money to be spent. So work-wise, I'm buoyant.
Can you make a business case for some money to be spent on us next?
Maybe. Actually, that could be useful use of my time. That would stop Nick banging on about how the podcast doesn't make any money.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to give up a day of your week, yeah, whatever.
Do you know,
anyway,
in terms of your voice, can hit. I don't think it's going to last that long, but
no.
I noticed there's we've been binging. We've been watching an episode of RuPaul's Drag Race every night, and season 10, early on in that, he becomes very subdued in voice, and it's not feeling too well, but still sort of doing the drag. We're talking about the thing, but sort of it was all a bit subdued and more quiet. And I thought, I guess someone's pushing through a little bit of a croaky throat, just still kind of having to do the same thing. So if they can do it, You can do it.
I can do it. You remind me of one of my students' things they did yesterday. It was like, I've done a thing. They'd basically done nothing. And they just done a screen with a login. And it was like, here you can put your name in and you can say if you're a boy or a girl. Okay. And I was like, that's really inspiring. I said, so it's 2019 in Brighton and you've chosen male or female as your gender options. Seriously. It's like, So he was like, I suppose so. It's like, we're supposed to be living in a gender fluid society where actually, and in any case, why does gender even matter for your app? So we had a conversation about that. Obviously, I tried to deliver that message in a slightly more nurturing, educational way. Yeah. But I was still like, dude.
At least put, would rather not say.
or something. It's just like, I'm a boy or a girl was literally what he'd put.
It's complicated.
Yeah. But yeah, my week's been good. I've given a bit more money to Extinction Rebellion.
Okay.
Because next week is the big rebellion week. Anyway, how was your week, Michael?
Got some good work done. I've been sort of fretting around about how I can kind of like make more time for projects and get some people patronizing one of my projects or more of them. And this morning I was like, I kind of want to do a video every week and just really start like cannonballing forwards and sort of do like maybe 2 blank state videos a month and 2 music related videos a month, which is like this. If I were to kind of like, okay, let's park this contract and like make some time for myself, which do I want to do again, because I always seem to then end up having to recover from it for ages. But like if I can put some time into getting some, I mean, part of it is let's kind of actually make a pitch, which is if you give me X amount a month, then I will be able to do this. But you also sort of have to show some momentum before people will start investing, I think, because I think I really like doing this. And I spoke to a mutual friend of ours, Lorenzo, about, I was like, because I liked the thread that you talked about the other week, tied into something that I want to try, which is, because I think the blank state thing, the output of that would be this sort of post-democratic decision-making platform where you kind of capture what you think the outputs should be, and then in terms of what Lorenzo was saying, you capture like what the values people hold. And then I just really want to simulate, or kind of like machine learning, see if you can transform, here is the set of resources available, here's what taxation might be, can you solve for the outputs we want using like a dynamic policy system. So rather than these ad hoc, we're going to invent a policy and someone's going to invent another policy, someone else is going to invent a law, and trying to sort of always just adding onto this pile of confusing legislation and documentation. Could you just like remove all that, just have the values, the stated values of your society, and just kind of allow the actual implementation to mutate as people find ways around it, so that it always kind of maintains the things that we actually want to come out of it, instead of always like focusing on the new rules we're going to create. So that's something I was like, well, I kind of want to find some backing, like how am I going to get people to kind of help? I don't know. I kind of need some proper time to be able to do something like that. But yeah, so it's really been working and thinking about that sort of thing, but not really feeling like I can actually do very much. And we're going away on Sunday to Milan, and we're going to be there for 10 days. So I'm going to be a little trip to Florence, but I'm going to be away from the studio. So maybe I'll sort of start a more animating / stock footage style video project for this month, because I won't be back till it's nearly out of time for next month's video or videos. That's my week. Sorry.
Well, thank you for sharing, Michael. You made me think of 2 things. One of them was on the subject of your present contract holder. I didn't know Airbnb do this project called Open Homes.
Right, no. I didn't
so
know
you can open a room in your house for free to somebody who needs it.
Wow.
So they all do some identity verification, but they gave example. I think it's very US centric, but it's like somebody recovering from an illness, bearing in mind that being ill in America will bankrupt you. Somebody recovering from an illness, somebody needing shelter after a disaster like a hurricane, which there are more of, or a fire, or somebody more generally homeless. But I think those were their like safe roads in, but it looked very legit, but I didn't really dig in too much. And there was something else. This I started a conversation about this post-politics world where in the pub last night we were having a conversation about, because obviously Brexit got postponed again.
That's the other thing. Well, just it's like cancel it, you twats.
Yeah, well, the conversation went along the lines of, it seems like Brexit is something our government is doing while the rest of us are trying to live our lives, and it's beyond shameful. Yeah. And I think we should go a step further than voting. We should actually sue them for dereliction of duty, which interestingly raises this thing that under the Human Rights Act, I'm telling a very long story, but anyway, under the Human Rights Act, which we are trying to pull out of, or Theresa May is trying to get us out of, which is one of the things that would happen post-Brexit, you would have no rights, therefore you would be unable to sue your government. Whereas under current law, you can, the teenagers in America are suing their government for not leaving them a livable planet. That kind of stuff. Anyway, but we did then in the pub, that was the start. I gave the starting statement, which was, I woke up this morning thinking, do you know what, they're fucking about with Brexit whilst the rest of us are just trying to plan, live our lives and make plans. And then we had a conversation about post-politics where it was more about what we wanted to do. And really this whole Labour Party versus this party versus that party, I think is, it's just a bit old school. I think we've gone out of that now. Yeah. I think it's done. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have decided that after this local election, I'm ending my Labour Party membership. Yeah. I would like us to have a Labour local council, because I aspire to Brighton being like Preston. When we went to a meeting and that introductory talk, that Aditya Chakraborty did a talk about how Preston is the most improved local council in the country after voting of kind of very left Labour council. And so they've rejuvenated their local economy by changing the model of the way they work. So, employing people locally, giving contracts locally, trying to get business. So eliminating the bigger providers.
Right.
So they've actually done quite a lot to improve their local standard of living with those kind of what people term things like socialist and left wing, but really are kind of respectful of humans kind of policies. Anyway, so this is what you made me think of when you were talking about your Lorenzo app.
Okay.
That's what we should call it.
Lorenzo app.
The Lorenzo app, where everyone goes, why was it called the Lorenzo app? Well, this, that thing that that tells us the mood of the nation, the Lorenzo app. Why is it called the Lorenzo app? Well,
it's the Lorenzo app because it reminds you of the Lorentz transforms, which are a thing in physics or maths. I can't remember what they are.
No, I've done those and I can't remember.
Also don't know what eigenfunctions are anymore. Or,
don't know.
For that matter, ordinary differential equations.
I remember finding Fourier transforms really hard.
I still have a lot of contact with those through audio processing stuff. Digital signal processing does actually use quite a lot of that sort of thing. Oh my God, why am I doing my dad's voice?
What?
So wealth, houses, coins, piles of gold, slaves,
time off,
dogs.
It's my dog part of my wealth.
I think it's probably I don't know. Do you go hunting?
I bought the dog a vegan treat yesterday.
I'm sure he fucking loved you for that. He was like,
I bought him a bag of vegan treats. They're like those little rawhide bones, and I put it in front. He did eat it. He's eaten two now, but he sort of looks at them and then looks around as if to say, is this it? Is there anything else? No, that's what you're getting, Floyd. All right, okay. And he looks around again and gives it another stiff. But then he got into it. So
we had some of this vegan, gluten-free ice cream yesterday, and frankly, it was just like a cold powder.
Maybe it's just a step too far.
Yeah, I don't know why. It was just like one of those ones that it's like, 300 calories in the whole tub. Let's try that. Because one of them was all right, but this one was just like, come on, what are you doing?
There is a Swedish vegan ice cream floating around at the moment that's quite nice.
There's loads of them. And like we've had this one.
You just hit upon a dud.
Just hit a dud. And I wish I could tell you which one it was. Maybe I'll put a link in the description. Avoid this one. It tastes like
Don't eat
balls.
this one. Like cold powder.
It's cold cocoa powder.
Anyway, yes. So wealth.
Wealth. How much ice cream is in your freezer? Wealth. So where do we start? Like, do we start from a personal thing or do we start from a global
the reason
thing?
I'd misheard you. That's why we ended up talking about wealth, because you said well and I heard wealth. Because, so I'm going to start. I'm going to put down the
first brick,
lay it out there.
Foundation.
The Monday is the launch of the big International Extinction Rebellion. So watch out, people. There'll be lots of peaceful protesting happening at a crossroads near you. And as part of that, last week I met up with a former colleague, friend, somebody who she's a university professor, and we have some good chats. Can't talk about politics too. And we started our conversation with her saying, look, we can't talk about politics too much, otherwise we'll just get really depressed and we'll split terrorists. It's like, fair enough. So we talked about, but she's like me, sort of peripherally very supportive of the Extinction Rebellion stuff, and has realised that she would make quite a good legal observer, especially as she's a university professor. That would be quite good if she was. And we were but we were talking. So we met the week before last, and I was saying I really don't know how much I'm going to get involved or what I can do time wise, but I'll continue to share and donate and all that. And and then on her Facebook she put yesterday, she said a different sort of out of office for next week, she says, so it says basically I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible, but this week I shall be out supporting the Extinction Rebellion and all that, sort of a statement about that. And that's not really what's interesting. What's interesting was then in her comment she says she said, not least, one of today's readings was the back cover of Latour's new book. I don't know who that is. So the present ecological mutation has organised the whole political landscape for the last 30 years. This could explain the deadly cocktail of exploding inequalities, massive deregulation, and conversion of the dream of globalisation into a nightmare for most people. What holds these three phenomena together is the conviction, shared by some powerful people, that the ecological threat is real and that the only way for them to survive is to abandon any pretense at sharing a common future with the rest of the world. Hence their flight offshore and their massive investment in climate change denial. The left has been slow to turn its attention to this new situation. It is still organised along an axis that goes from investment in local values to the hope of globalisation, and just at the time when everywhere people dissatisfied with the ideal of modernity are turning back to the protection of national or even ethnic borders. This is why it is urgent to shift sideways and to define politics as what leads towards the earth and not toward the global or the national. Belonging to a territory is the phenomenon most in need of rethinking and careful redescription. Learning new ways to inhabit the earth is our biggest challenge. Bringing us down to earth is the task of politics today.
So name again?
Latour. So this is just the back of the Latour book. So Latour, Latour.
So these are wealth. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. So we've talked about this not only through Rutger Bergman, through Rushkoff talking about going to visit wealthy people who have assumed, a crisis is coming, and how do we control our guards when money has no value anymore, and that kind of conversation. But I think this, and weirdly, whilst I read that, and I'm kind of aware of this phenomena, and I'm a bit like, but then at the same time, I just think that unlike any time in history, we are not so distant and unconnected. While we can be manipulated, as discussed in previous, I'm talking we the masses, we the 99%, whilst we can be manipulated, as evidenced by, the referendum, by Trump getting elected, we also more educated, more literate, more connected, more able to communicate than we ever have before. And I kind of, weirdly, reading that, instead of making me go, oh my God, it's all a waste of time, I sort of felt like, actually, no, if you're gonna try and take that approach, the 1%, then I think you've got a bigger fight on your hands than you thought.
Why do you think they're funding climate change denial if this is their game? If they know it's urgent and real, what do they gain by trying to make everyone else think it isn't?
I suppose they don't. If you accept climate change as real and urgent and critical, it requires a significant rethink of how we live our lives. And that would disrupt them. It would also bring more to the foreground, like things like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. She's bringing to the foreground how connected inequality is to how it supports climate, it sort of increases climate change. Basically, to help us avoid climate disaster, we need them to release their wealth back into society.
Right.
And I think,
yes,
I think that's probably fundamental to it. They need to accept that they're more normal than they think they are, that they're more human than they think they are, that taking a walk in the forest is as pleasurable to me as it is to, Jeff Bezos.
You don't like midges.
Unless you don't like midges. Well, then not all forests have midges.
Yeah, and I think the point there is, but some of that is to do with holding on to wealth requires a certain amount of predictability of the environment, a certain amount of stability. Yeah. So if things change too much, that really sort of threatens all of your wealth. So in visceral terms, you may have a farm, but then you may not have that if suddenly you go to war and some sort of marauding force comes in and sets fire to everything, and now all of your wealth is gone. So in the same way that the ultra wealthy, they maintain all of their control of their wealth either through just it's kind of digital now, so there's no limit to how much you can say you've got. But if someone just kind of like destroys the things that kind of maintain that illusion, then you don't have any wealth anymore. And similarly, like if it's all in property, if suddenly the laws about how much, how property ownership and there's people nearby that can just move into it. Like your wealth you kind of need to maintain a certain status quo. Otherwise your wealth starts to become a lot more questionable, ephemeral. It's like, is it real? Because it relies on everyone having the same sort of shared beliefs.
Yeah. I think, our historical examples of changes in world order, like, the French Revolution, the bourgeois, they lost their heads as well as their wealth. Like there's no historical example of the people who have much in a new world order coming away with their lives, never mind any wealth.
This is what Delton is trying to achieve. I do believe is like he wants to give the wealthy like an in to be able to sort of still hold on to most of their wealth, whilst kind of supporting things that will benefit the world, the earth, the environment, the world. Yeah. So, let's mint this currency that's issued in response to taking damaging things out of the atmosphere, and only then, but it's also very safe. It has this rising interest, like exchange rate, so that that your wealth is going to be, okay, well, that's somewhere that we've all agreed that's for the next 100 years, my wealth, at least some portion of my wealth, can be safe in there. If we sort of give them that, maybe options like that, then is that a way to sort of extract it? But when you just look at I saw this video with like just the graphs, and you just see, it was the one about the wealth, taxing the wealth instead of taxing income, which Elizabeth Warren wants to do. There's a video about it, and it just showed the graphs. It's a steep curve, like for your doctor who earns like 300k a year or whatever. But then it just becomes astronomical, absolutely unimaginable once you start getting to that 1%. And it's just you just think like just chip the top off that and spread it out among everyone, and we'd all be fine. And
if it could even be the top 20% or 10%, it would make a massive difference.
It would change everything. It would change everything. But it is unbelievable. Like, it's just unimaginable numbers that these people have. Like, billions of dollars is ridiculous. And all they care is whether they have what the number is. Like, is it 1 billion or 2? Is it 5 or is it 6? And
I cannot imagine that it makes any material difference to your life.
How could it?
1 billion or 2.
Other than, like, what's my score looking like today? It could not. And, like, I watched Ellen's... did I talk about this? Like, Ellen's stand-up special. And there's just a sort of insight into what wealth starts letting you do above a certain level. Just gets more and more sort of petty. Like, once you're over that $50,000 or $70,000 or whatever, that thing where like money is no longer the defining thing in your freedom, it becomes the thing like, oh, I parked my car awkwardly, and rather than go through the embarrassment of having to admit that, I'll just buy another car. You know, it's that sort of problem that you start being able to solve. Which, I mean, come on, guys, like it becomes really stupid. And with all that wealth, you're still just one person. You're still just you can't live in 27 different mansions.
No.
You can only be in one place. You only have so many hours in the day. So just all this accumulation just really stops being of any value after a certain point.
I would really like to interview or understand, maybe she's written about it somewhere, somebody like J.K. Rowling, who has openly talked about paying tax properly. You sort of, as a beneficiary of the welfare state, she is like, you know, all about paying her taxes. And I wonder what sets her aside from somebody like Jeff Bezos, who just clearly doesn't give a flying fuck.
Has he talked about this? Because I don't know. Because I know there's like some token philanthropy thing, but yeah, tax-wise, it's... You know, he's my brother. I was talking to my brother yesterday about, like, I asked him about a quote about doing our bathroom floor, some tiling. He was like, don't pay someone that much. But he told me about this new, Amazon's now doing like a handyman service, which he goes, it's terrible for me, but it's really good for you. But yeah, it's just like, and my response is like, I mean, does Jeff Bezos really need any more money? And you just, it's always at the expense of, I mean, yeah, a lot of these contractors aren't very trustworthy, but some of the ones that should be charging that much money that now won't be able to. Like, it does come at the cost of, you know, it's sort of nice for us, but it comes at the cost of the people of labour.
Somebody has to pay. And ultimately, if you don't pay somebody enough, you know, a decent pay for a decent day's work, or whatever, you know, there's that phrase, I can't remember the phrase. Then if you don't pay them directly, then you will ultimately pay them through your taxes, because they'll end up, you know, like they can't earn enough money to live. I don't really know, you know, this kind of race to the cheapest is a peculiar, I mean, I totally understand it. We all want to make the best use of our money, but I think to some extent we're misdefining what the best use of our money is. You know, paying a handyman a reasonable amount of money to a handyman who's going to pay his taxes and participate in our society. Surely that has this extra value than giving less money to Jeff Bezos, who'll make sure it is of no benefit to broader society. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know how we measure that. Like, how do you shift that mindset.
Well, it's hard because it's because there is like, and if there's this whole efficiency thing that, like, you know, an individual plumber can't really offer the same level of, you know, booking efficiency and management and all that stuff that Amazon is perfectly positioned to create, to supply, because they have this sort of technological expertise. It's hard enough for a plumber to even have like a reception desk, you know, that you can call someone that's going to like go onto the calendar and book it. You sort of sometimes end up with people that just text, might get a reply, might not get a reply. They might turn up at some random point. Like, we've literally got someone like that. It's like, doesn't reply, and then 2 weeks later, I'm in the area. Are you home? It's like, what the you know? So there is a problem being solved, but it's like any of these. If it's not the plumbers themselves creating the platform, then they ultimately lose out, even though they're the ones that are actually doing the labour. Yeah,
because I mean, Bezos could equally create a platform for plumbers to use that he charges a sensible fee. So it could be not about undercutting, but about efficiency,
enabling
or supporting. I mean, my plumber and I had a good chat the other day. He goes, "You always text me," and I was like, "Well, I thought you'd be like doing something, and then the text is just sitting there waiting when you've not got your hands full of spanners." And he was, "Oh, I much prefer a phone call." All right. He goes, and then he said, You've really thought this through, haven't you, Hank? I was like, "Yeah, that's what it's like. Yeah, but I prefer a phone call." Cool.
So can I have a break?
So probably.
I want to talk about the distinction between wealth and value of that wealth to the person, because the wealth, the same amount of currency, in terms of wealth, it can be the same number, but in terms of value to you, is vastly different depending on how much you've got. So the metaphor being just in terms of potatoes, if you've got a crop of 100 potatoes and you give one away, that has pretty much no value to you. Whereas if the person's only got 2 potatoes and you take that one away, then that's kind of like half their shit.
Half their potatoes.
It's half their potatoes. And so the idea that, how do rich people feel about that? How do the wealthy feel about the actual value to them of their wealth? It's like, oh, well, I can look after my children. Well, yeah, you can, but still, that's another 0.5% of it.
I just think I don't know. Obviously, I don't know.
What does it mean? What does the wealth mean to the wealthy?
I don't know. I can imagine it's just got to be a feeling of power and invulnerability. I don't know.
We've got this, and we always come back to this scorekeeping thing, and it's like, that's fucked.
Well, it's powers. It's got to be power. Do you remember in that that panel? There was Rutger Bergman, and then there was the woman, the CEO of Oxfam, and this, ex-Yahoo finance director, CFO, whatever he was, stood up, and he's another Davos attendee, and said, "Well, the US has got this massive employment rate." It's like, you're measuring the wrong thing. I don't know. I think it's got to be power related. It's got to be psychological power game. It's like a computer game, isn't it? Can't be any more. It cannot be any more tangibly rewarding than a computer game. Surely.
Yeah, you get, and there's only so many burgundy rooms you can kind of hang out in.
So therefore, so if that's the game you want to play, how do we gamify paying your taxes?
Well, it is this crazy thing that you saw in Shuttleworth, and I mean, I'm going to talk about him, but this sort of like panic around protecting the wealth once you've got it. This sort of like, okay, I've got this, and now I've got to do everything to just make sure that I keep having it. And it's like, well, you'll be all right.
Yeah. There's definitely that. I mean, somebody that rich could lose most of it and still be richer than we're ever going to imagine.
there's that Silicon Valley, the character in there where he's like, he's not in the 9-0 club anymore or whatever. He's like just sunk at below 1,000 billion or whatever, and like 100 billion, and he's like absolutely mortified and going through this sort of dark night of the soul, and it's like, Jesus, like it's so gross.
But how do we all feel? Like, you've worked really hard, let's say, in your head. In your head, you've worked really hard. I mean, when I am employed, I don't really notice my tax.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It comes, I only notice what goes into my bank account. Then occasionally you look at your bank statement and you're like, oh, your pay slip. You go, oh, how much tax do I pay? Wow. But you don't have to hand it over yourself.
Yeah.
So you don't really notice it. As a self-employed person, it's a bit more in your face because you've got to pay it. And you're like, oh, I thought that was my, like, because psychologically you've sent a bill and the money gets put in your account and you're like, that's my money. So it's a bit more of it's a bit more tangible. It's like people say, if you want to save money, start paying for things in cash, because then you'll notice how much you're spending more. So how do we get tax off them without them noticing?
Well, I mean,
without them having to walk to the bank with a suitcase, a truck of cash. Because it's maybe your potato scenario. It's like, stop thinking about it in how much money it is, but rather what minuscule share of what you have it really is.
Or just give them something in return, like something they can.
A lollipop.
give them some gold fucking crisps. I don't know, some sort of token that they can say, look, I've got X amount of billions of dollars plus 7 billion I'm a good person units, right? Like, and that's my wealth. It's not just the money, because like if it is like, I kind of want a sticker if I've just given blood, like I want to
stickers for billionaires.
It's like, oh well, you're just going to take it and you're not even going to you're just going to make me feel bad about it. Like, I keep coming back to this idea of like protecting the feelings of the ultra wealthy exploiting us for just kind of like bleeding us dry. But I don't know how else to do it than just kind of giving them something that makes them feel good about themselves. Give them a fruit basket. Give them something that goes, thanks.
The problem is you're thanking them for doing what everyone else has to do. Like,
sure, we're not asking... thank us as well. Thank everyone. But, if you maybe, you don't get a fruit basket.
What's interesting, so I think the other side of it, maybe, I don't know. So one of the things they talk about is increasing the tax percentage on the more wealthy. So like Rutger Bergman, our new best friend for the podcast, he gives that example that in 30s America, the tax on the top rate tax was really high. It was like 80-90% or whatever. And I think that would be the bit that really hurt. Oh, I've got 90 billions and now I'm going to have to give a whole billion. I'm only going to be left with $1 billion. I have no choice but to pay my corporation tax at full whack. There's no, I mean, if everyone just paid, or we closed off the tax avoidance loops and just paid the base rate of tax, surely that would already make a difference.
Yeah, that's why I think like a dynamic system would be more effective, because you wouldn't anymore be able to just have more expensive lawyers and figure out the workarounds, because those would be constantly changing. And it's like at a certain point you just have to go, okay, right, well, I'm just going to have to embrace the values of this society and just do my part, because it's going to outwit me at every turn. And that's something I'd like to see if that's possible to create, because because every rule you add brings with it possible bugs, brings with it possible loopholes, which will be exploited by the people with the most wealth.
I think this finding the loopholes, I understand that, you pay your expensive accountant and you pay your expensive lawyer to basically bug find in your tax protocols. and I understand that is a sort of like, in a weird way, when people go, yeah, but we can't say that Amazon don't pay their taxes, they're not breaking any laws. I do get that argument. I really do. I'm like, I mean, I as a small business, I claim what I'm entitled to claim in terms of my taxes. The difference is that I'm not ferreting out sneaky ways of doing it. I'm just doing the base rules. If I use a computer to do my work, then the computer is a business expense type of stuff. That's about as far as I can claim. Rather than, I don't know, saying, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to offshore my limited company in the Cayman Islands, and I'm going to put myself tax resident in Switzerland. Then I'm going to, and all that kind of stuff that is just going that step. That is active tax avoidance versus just running a business and being incentivized by a government to, I don't know, keep your business alive. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, would it start by just making those sorts of practices dirty, unacceptable, like smoking?
I mean, it's a physics unto itself. It's gravity. It's things flowing to where they are. It's going to kind of, you're going to hold on to it for the longest, and it's like once you know that something exists and you're not doing it, and you could be, then you're just sort of stupid in the eyes of your peers. Unless you really are actually motivated to do the right thing, you're sort of fighting gravity. You're fighting the sort of sneers of your contemporaries when you play golf.
Look at that idiot paid all his taxes.
Yeah, I think that's probably the world they're living in.
Yeah, it probably is. I did get another idea, which is like, how in the world of hacking and finding security flaws, like there's this, this phrase, black hat, white hat, that business. Obviously,
sorry.
Shall I explain it to you? So
you can get a big reward for. So instead of like hacking the system and exploiting it and stealing from it, you are incentivized to tell the people that have the system that there's a big hole in it, and they give you a reward for that because it helps the system.
So imagine if the government offered, there was a concept, because really I think this is a concept of black hat accountants and people who employ black hat accountants and white hat accountants, although there's not. But what you could do is, because given the cost of tax avoidance at these high corporate levels, why not offer accountants who love ferret, give them £1 million? If you find a legal loophole, we, the government, are going to give you personally £1 million for finding that loophole.
I think that's it. I think you've solved it.
We've solved it, right?
We've solved it. Right. No, I think that's really good. And I think there's so many things we can learn from our world that can be applied to this, because it's all about systems. It's all about it's all the same language, but we're doing it on at this rapid pace, versus whereas these systems are very slow moving, and so they haven't had as much chance to kind of invent language around all these things. And meanwhile, security and tech and all that sort of thing, we've got all the language, we've got the practices that we've found that work. So let's do it. Now, just for the last bit of the podcast, let's talk about how to get wealthy.
Sage advice from Michael and Ivanka to not very wealthy people.
Well, I just want to call out a mistake I've always made. I think the mistake, the grand illusion, the grand scam that has been perpetrated since feudal times by the aristocracy when they said, no, you're not going to have local currency. You're going to have to use this central currency, which we control. And everything is basically, we're going to lend you money and you're going to pay interest so that we can still hold on to all of our wealth. And it's all about you. It's like the higher the more wealth you possess, the more you just make out of interest and just on the top. And if you can sort of get that to a point where if I've got £100 million, I'm never going to spend the £100 million. I'm going to spend the £1 million that I get automatically every year just because of the mechanism of the system that we're in. So it's like when we talk about, to us, it's like we think about £1 million. It's like, what would I spend £1 million on? To the wealthy, it's like, no, well, I have to protect and hold on to that £1 million so that I can get £50,000 like every to pay the person and at no cost to myself, with no labour, with no effort. And that's what wealth really means at that level. And that's the fundamental scam that we've all kind of fallen victim to.
Weirdly, I hadn't thought about it that way at all until you just said it just before the podcast. I was like, oh, yeah, you got your money to work for you, not buy things.
And it's and again, that's sort of like a functional difference. So just in personal terms, one thing that has made me feel better about is, I just have this automatic instinct that I'm a musician, so I want, and there's so much expensive music gear, and honestly there is a factor of you can make better sounding music if you have more variety and more expensive equipment. It just sounds better.
It's true.
and it's fun, and but then sometimes I compare like the cost of a laptop, which as a programmer, I can kind of make that money back within like not too long. Whereas the amount I've put into music compared to the amount that I've ever got out of it was just like pretty kind of, well, nothing. I mean, I'm definitely massively in the red on this, but I do have the things I've bought. And if I think of those instead of, maybe I don't have to feel like I have to get the equivalent value of the equipment back. As long as you need to think it more as, okay, this is capital I now have, means of production I now own, but think of it more like you get interest off the top of that through, like if I sell 2 albums in a month, then that's actually not nothing. That's kind of a more healthy way of thinking about it, if it is literally an investment in myself. There is that very real sense in that you have to sort of take it out of circulation in order to be able to make it work for you. Yeah.
I think the difference is that you could have, taken the money you spent and have it living in an ISA.
Yes.
That gives you some money, whereas you've put it into a collection of tools that help you make money and make music.
And it's
and which is not, yes, there is some monetary gain to be had, either real or potential, but there is a huge amount of spiritual gain.
Well, that's the hope, and it comes back to that risk diversification thing. If you're a rich person, you have a portfolio of investments, and you spread that between high risk and low risk investments. And so like the music thing is a massively high risk investment. Much more than I ever thought it was when I was younger as well. Whereas an ISA is pretty solid, but much lower yield. But you could just get nothing. It's like what rich people will do is they'll spread it out. So they'll have some on the stock market, and then they'll have some in housing. They'll have some in just ISAs and stuff like that. And and it's like really their level of risk that they want to be at is how much they allocate to all those different things. Which is why. So another trap we're all falling into is this idea that a mortgage is a good investment. It is as part of a portfolio where you have low risk investments in there as well. But if all of your investments are in this one high risk asset, then you're really like treading a tightrope with that. And wealthy people would never do that. So there's a lot of ways in which we're being kind of taken for a ride by these things.
That's why I've got a pomegranate farm in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Come the climate apocalypse, I'm going to be drinking pomegranate juice. As long as there's bees. I'll just have to run between the trees spreading the pollen. I have got beehives on they're not my bees, but we host beehives.
Well,
yes,
that's all right for some.
And it's on a hill, so
but But Ivanka, do you have any synths? Because I've got synths. They massively depreciate in value almost immediately.
No synths. I've got zero synths on my asset portfolio. In the synths column, there are 0 synths.
Well, that's a terrible state of affairs, in my opinion. So yeah, like the fact is, just to say, like, wealth. The best way to get money is to have a lot of money. That's the most reliable way to make money.
Truthfully.
But you know, the rest, to get meaning, that has literally no meaning. There's literally nothing in that self-actualization part of Maslow's triangle hierarchy. Did you see the School of Life did a video on hierarchy of needs this week? I posted our podcast episode next to it on Facebook. Say, hey, we were just talking about that. My philosophy has always been, I want the money I have to be from stuff I did that was good.
That was
I want it to come from my labour, like that, because I just believe that's. I think if your wealth comes from your own labour, it just feels more legitimate. It feels more meaningful, so much more meaningful.
I mean, I think I just drew with my wanky consultant head on. I just drew a quadrant thing. It's like, you know, like if there's 4 quadrants, 4 squares, you've got like low meaning, high meaning, low money, high money. And you want, you know, if possible, you want to be making, you know, decent money out of things that have high meaning. The worst quadrant to exist in is no money or even no money and no meaning, or low money and no meaning. Anyway,
which is the space that 99% of the population lives in, and like not just sort of shit jobs, but bullshit jobs is a huge thing now. Like, you know, I'm still kind of reading through Graeber's book about bullshit jobs. So much of our lives are taken with these, you know, these sort of these high-paying jobs where you don't do anything, kind of just destroying people.
Yeah. And they're not making them happy. They're not making them healthy. They're going to die young, unhappy, unfulfilled.
There was a good thread on Hacker News about, like, okay, someone's saying, like, if I've just kind of got this huge, we've just been a choir and I've got like X million dollars out of nowhere, asking for advice, like, what do people say? What's the best thing to do? And like, one of the top things is health. Like, just make sure you're healthy, because like once you've got that kind of, like, nothing else is going to be as important as your health.
No.
And then just lots of advice about, like, don't invest in your friends' stuff. Don't, you know, do invest it this way, blah blah blah. Like, make it work for you. And but really, there's no point having all the wealth in the world if you can't walk around and be a human being.
This is another Ivanka's dad philosophy. It's like he banged on at us a whole, like, you know, the 20 years that I knew him, it was like, if you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. You must look after your health. While you're healthy, you can do a shit job if you need to survive. But if you've lost your health, you can't do anything. He went on and on about it the whole time. It's one of his themes. I think it's true. Though I had this conversation with my brother yesterday. I was like, I've had this back pain. I was like, why don't you go and see my chiropractor, who's really good and I've known for a long time. I haven't got money for that. Have you not? Really? You know, it's like, so you're gonna, it's like,
yeah. I mean, and that like really helped me kind of accept that it's okay that my gym membership is one of my biggest expenses, because, you know, what matters more than being able to
being fit and healthy. It's like it's a big thing for me. I don't want to be an old lady sooner than I need to be. You know, like not that I want to live forever like you. I don't have quite the same sort of aspirations to immortality, but I'm just thinking about my daughter and thinking about how much older I am than she is, and you know, just wanting to be like not a burden for as long as possible, to actually be actively involved in her life instead of going, can you fetch me this, dear? I think I'll make a great old lady though, but that's a different story.
I think I'd be quite a good old man actually. I've already sort of like been looking at canes, going, that's a nice cane. I think I could rock that cane. I'm just going to be hobbling along with my cane, waving it at people.
Waving it angrily.
In an attempt to summarise this, the lives of the ultra wealthy seem so stupid, that would seem, it's so ridiculous the way they sort of walk around, the delusions that they have and the worlds that they live in, and just the loneliness that implicitly comes with that, and just the disconnection. I would feel sorry for them if it were not at the cost of the rest of us. At the expense of the rest of us.
Yeah.
I do not envy their lives. I wouldn't mind I do envy their lives.
Yeah.
Aspects of it. I'd like to fly first class without not being able to do anything else for the rest of the next 2 years. But I don't envy that. I think like the ideal existence in terms of wealth is more at a lower level, but distributed. That is what would lead to a good society. That was what would lead to a good existence. Distribution of wealth would just be so much better than having to be in that fearful 1% mindset, scared that people are coming for you, not being able to walk through certain areas, having to fly private because you like on your private jet the whole time, and just feeling like you have to protect yourself from the poor people. What a shit existence to, inflict on yourself. That's not something I would aspire to, and I don't know. I don't think they should be aspiring to it either. So
no,
maybe it's just a lack of imagination. They just need to see what everyone getting paid the same would look like and realise that it's fucking great.
Well, it's just nicer. There is I will, if I can find it, send you the link to the Liverpool football team manager talking about how he votes, but ultimately it says, if I'm doing well, I want everyone to do well. And really, that's all it is. You know, why do you want people to suffer in order for you to do well? Because that's what you're doing.
And their suffering leads to your suffering as well. Their suffering leads to you being afraid and on edge.
Afraid of what's going to happen to you.
Generally worse than if you just lifted them up.
It seems to be so obvious.
Sort it out, Jeff.
Maybe one day when I'm a billionaire, I'll understand.
Maybe.
The pain that they survive.
Yes. All right. Well, I hope so. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
If you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com. If you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/grandpodcast and be the first. Second, maybe.
Actually, no. Second. Sharon's first.
Sharon's backing my Patreons, if no one else. And also giving me a place to live. Where can we find you, Ivanka?
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com and on YouTube and stuff, and on Facebook and all over the place. But just go to michaelforestmusic.com, start there.
Just Google Michael Forest.
Well,
what happens if you Google Michael Forest?
I don't trust it anymore. It used to be that you, like, if you typed in your name, that you sort of felt like you were seeing what other people were seeing. But now I don't even know. I go into private browsing and see what Michael Forest returns. Am I the top? No, I'm the fourth. And it also it has the audacity to put Michael Forest with one R above Michael Forest with two R's. Even though that's what I typed. So
You should shift to browsing with the kosher or kosher or however you say
Should
it.
I?
Wish I knew
What,
how
just-
to say. I wish I was more confident saying it.
Just for my vanity search, Googling. My vanity searches, if nothing else. But that's not going to tell me what people see when they search my name either, is
No.
it? Unless they all use the same.
We need to have
bloody
words with Google as well. They're another. We've picked on Jeff.
thing. We have,
today.
but we need to talk
need to pick on
and
Google
let's
a bit.
fucking Apple we need to have a
Oh,
word
yeah,
with them.
that's-
Jesus Christ! Like another, and my last laptop was like an extra grand on at least on top of the previous one. This phone, I just had to get a new phone. Finally, I did repair it before, but it was just like it was just not the same. But so I got a new phone, and it's like now the prices are still just going up by hundreds of pounds.
Yeah,
And it's like, what do you need this for? What are you going to do with this? When are we going to see some benefit from this, Apple? Anyway.
Anyway, so
I mean, we do.
yes,
I do make all of my money by making stuff for Apple's platform, so I should probably not, not be
bite
too
the hand that
angry
feeds
about
you.
it.
Yeah, but they could still not charge ridiculous
They could
amounts of
still
money
just
for it.
try and be cool. Yes, sorry. What were we saying? So yeah,
We
what
were
else?
saying that if you want to encourage us to do more ranting on the internet, then please do write us reviews, rate us on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. It does help people find it. You can do it overall for the podcast or every episode. I mean, if you just go in and just 5-star every episode, that would be amazing.
Imagine that, labour.
You can do that while you're listening, blind 555 like that. Something to do.
Wonderful.
There you go. All right then. Thank you for listening. Shall we go now?
All right. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.